The name of the movie is Cleveland Abduction. The film opens with a description of Michelle, the lead character, a 21-year-old nautical woman who lives beside her mother. Michelle found herself married and a mother of a 3-year-old son at the age of 18, despite her youth and hopes for a prosperous career. Michelle had to go on daily job interviews because of financial difficulties in order to make ends meet. Sadly, her little education and unfinished education made it difficult for her to find employment. One day, when she had come home tired, Michelle found a man sitting next to her and he began acting strangely toward her. Motivated by the circumstances, Michelle's son stood up for her, which led the father to shove the youngster, leading to his fall and subsequent head damage. The occurrence alarmed Michelle, who hurried her son to the hospital. But the accompanying physician voiced worries about possible abuse, which prompted the social worker to get involved. The social worker temporarily took possession of the child due to the doctor's allegations, while an inquiry was conducted to find out the facts and protect the youngster. Distressed by the turn of events, Michelle pleaded desperately for her son's return and gave the social worker her story of what happened. Michelle's social worker tells her that because of her lack of income, precarious financial condition, and unwillingness to defend her child, she is currently unable to reclaim custody of her son. Michelle needs to go to court and take legal action in order to get her son back. Michelle is due in court the next week, and she is later seen talking about this with her buddy. Michelle is getting ready for her court appearance, but she is still positive about the outcome. Michelle leaves her house on the day of the court hearing, but she has trouble finding the correct place. She wanders around aimlessly for a while before asking for directions at a neighboring shop. There, she meets Ariel, a man, who offers to give her a ride to her destination. Michelle, who knows Ariel as her friend's father and has little time, accepts the offer. Michelle is first hesitant to buy a dog for her kid from Ariel's collection because of time restrictions, but Ariel persists. But considering her son's pleasure, she accepts Ariel's recommendation. Michelle arrives at Ariel's house, spots a dog outside, and walks in without a second thought. But as soon as they're inside and Ariel closes the door behind them, Michelle discovers his true intentions. Michelle realizes too late that she is in danger as Ariel shackles her, first securing her hands and feet, then taping her face, and lastly fastening wires to the roof to secure her complete body. Michelle realizes too late that she has fallen into a trap and is left in severe pain from the tight bindings. Michelle's constant worry, in spite of the difficult situation she was in, was her kid. She feared that Day's court appearance would lead to a permanent loss of custody. She begged Ariel to hurt her so she could get away, but he disregarded her demands with cold callousness. When the day wore on into the evening and Ariel did not show up, there were suspicions that Michelle had purposefully neglected her court appearances, which raised questions about possible abuse and neglect of her kid. Michelle's mother, with whom she had a tense relationship, also thought that Michelle had previously mistreated and injured her son. As a result, nobody bothered to look for Michelle when night fell and she did not return home. Eventually, after 2 days of hanging from the roof, Ariel returned and brought her down. Michelle was in very bad physical condition. She had not eaten all this period. She was mistreated even more by Ariel, who dehumanized her despite her defenseless position. A tap on the door at that very moment signaled the arrival of Ariel's mother, who brought Michelle some dinner. Later, Michelle was able to extricate herself when Ariel was deeply engaged in conversation with his mother. Even though she had the chance to run, Ariel caught up to her fast and threatened her with a gun. He went on to talk about his own troubles, saying that Michelle was now everything to him and that his family had abandoned him. In a terrible turn of events, Ariel continued to physically beat Michelle, causing serious agony for the defenseless woman. Over time, as the years went by and Christmas drew near, Michelle's health continued to worsen. Ariel continued to treat her cruelly, chaining her up like an animal, and neglected to give her proper clothing in spite of the cold. He would abuse her badly at his whim and then abandon her to languish in that horrible situation by herself. Michelle was restricted by sealed doors and windows in her cell, with the television serving as her only source of comfort. Even though she knew that nobody was actively looking for Michelle, Ariel installed alarms at each point of entry as a precaution. Michelle finally felt a glimmer of optimism for a possible escape on one of these days. Michelle's friend Ariel's kid shows up at the house with her friends for a party. When Michelle discovers this, she deliberately makes noise by clanging her chain on the bed to draw attention to herself. Michelle tries to stand out, but Ariel counters this by turning up the music loud enough to drown out any noises she might make. Michelle suffers continuous physical torture and misery for several days during this pattern. Michelle is worn out and used to the difficult life that has been thrust upon her, but she is resilient and won't give up. Michelle eventually gets to meet a dog thanks to Ariel, and she briefly feels happy as she interacts with it. But when Michelle tries to flee with the dog, Ariel catches her again and brutally murders the animal in front of her eyes. He gives her a terrifying warning: if she tries to run away once more, another animal will take her place. Having descended into a perverted state where his sadistic crimes have become normal to him, Ariel takes great pleasure in this warped power dynamic. Motivated by his growing malevolence, Ariel kidnaps a 17-year-old girl as his second victim. He chains Amanda, a girl named, together with Michelle. Along with the search operations, candles were lit and prayers were said, asking for the missing girl to be found as soon as possible. Michelle couldn't help but feel disregarded when she saw these coordinated efforts and realized that no such thought or prayer had ever been offered for her situation. While Michelle was sympathetic to Amanda's terrible circumstances, she was also hurt by this knowledge, bringing attention to her own sense of desertion. Weeks passed while this hopelessness persisted. Michelle unexpectedly found out she was pregnant one day. When Ariel heard this, he reacted angrily, savagely hitting her with a big dumbbell in an attempt to hurt the unborn kid. Michelle was in terrible pain from the attack, but Ariel showed her no compassion or empathy. His callous indifference won out. Michelle was put to work by Ariel, who took advantage of her labor when her health improved and used her help with his carpentry projects. Michelle asked an old neighbor for assistance during this time while she was working outside, but because of his advanced age, he was unable to understand the circumstances. Michelle's situation worsened as her meals grew irregular and her physical and mental health continued to decline. Michelle held fast to her faith in God and her hope of one day being freed from captivity in spite of all the hardships she endured. A few days later, Michelle discovered another missing young girl, this time a 14-year-old, while watching the news on TV. Michelle was even more disturbed by this information, which made her question the girl's fate and the potential culprit. She was lost in her thoughts when she was startled by screams coming from the house's surrounding area. This increased her fear and uneasiness about the evil things going on in her surroundings. Gina was the one whose voice echoed throughout the home. None of the occupants of the residence had noticed Michelle and Amanda arrive. Nevertheless, a neighbor heard Gina's terrified cries when Ariel took her inside, raising a red flag. The worried neighbor chose to call the police, voicing concerns about Ariel, even though Ariel was using music to block out the noise. Unfortunately, the neighbor's worries were disregarded by the police, who said that a mere suspicion was insufficient justification for getting involved. As a result, Ariel managed to avoid detection once more. Ariel mistreated Gina in a manner reminiscent of how he handled Michelle and Amanda. It became clear that Ariel's younger daughter was friends with Gina, highlighting his unsettling tendency to target young females with his wicked actions. Michelle learned that Amanda was kept apart by Ariel, and that Gina and herself were both held captive in the same room, with their hair being chopped off. Gina's parents went on camera to appeal for her safe return and to post missing posters in an attempt to find her, while the media focused on her disappearance. Gina was comforted by Michelle, who took on a protective position and provided comfort and support akin to that of an older sister, as she watched these efforts. She led him in prayer and gave him words of support. Ariel would mistreat Gina in front of Michelle. Michelle intervened, pleading with Ariel to spare Gina and proposing that he treat her badly instead. Ariel snubbed Michelle's plea, claiming coldly that nobody loved her and that she was unloved, unsearched for, and undesired, which satisfied him. Away from torturing her. This suffering persisted over time. Another shock was dealt by the news that Amanda's mother had died of her anguish over losing her daughter. It was soon discovered that Amanda was expecting. Ariel revealed a dark wish to be Amanda's mother. Ariel brutally killed Michelle and the unborn kid when Michelle fell pregnant in order to concentrate on Amanda's unborn child. Michelle was taken aback by Ariel's sudden liking for kids, as she showed a fresh affection for Amanda's daughter, who was born after Ariel had forced Michelle to have a horrific experience. As the youngster grew older, Amanda noticed some improvement in her situation over time, getting some consideration and attention from her kidnapper. Michelle and Gina, in stark contrast, were still living in appalling conditions with little access to food, few opportunities for personal cleanliness, and little freedoms like watching television and taking occasional baths. Michelle experienced more and more cruel and coercive treatment from Ariel. He fed her bad food for 4 days, and even then, it took 2 days to get to her. Besides, he put more work on her. After seeing Amanda's daughter, Michelle thought about her own son and realized he had probably aged a lot during their long confinement. Every year, Michelle continued the custom of hanging her son's birthday card on the wall to commemorate the 7 years since their incarceration. Ariel made a mistake when Amanda's youngster turned 6 years old. He left the door open after leaving the house. When Amanda's kid noticed this oversight, she quickly told her mother and pointed out the open door. Since Ariel had acted dishonestly in the past, Amanda initially assumed it was just another one of his schemes. But after looking into it, Amanda was shocked and thrilled to discover that the door was indeed kept open that day. Taking advantage of the situation, she ran outside with her daughter and yelled for assistance. This caught the attention of worried neighbors, who helped Amanda and her daughter and also phoned the police. Michelle and Gina were saved after officials looked into Ariel's house, although initially, Michelle wasn't convinced by their newfound independence. But when she realized that it was true, she was ecstatic. Her son's welfare was her top priority. Because of their bad condition and the shock they had experienced, the three were sent to the hospital right away. Due to her severe trauma, Michelle developed a strong mistrust and dislike of men. She would often scream in agony when she saw a male member of the medical team. The families of Amanda and Gina hurried to see them in the hospital, offering them their steadfast support and attention. They gave Michelle a lot of support, but nobody else made the effort to get in touch with her. Michelle found out that her son had been adopted at the age of 4 by a loving family after he was released from the hospital. The adoptive family made the decision to conceal Michelle's true identity from her offspring. Michelle was given housing, security, and basic utilities by the government. Later, she boldly told the court about her life, demanding justice and a harsh penalty for Ariel. Ariel was given a 10,000-year prison sentence, but sadly, after just 1 month in prison, she committed suicide because the weight of her deeds and the repercussions were intolerable. moving forward and starting a new chapter in their lives. Michelle, Amanda, and Gina did so. This concludes the film, showcasing their strength and resiliency as they deal with the chances and challenges that lie ahead.
If you want interesting movie recaps, like, share, and subscribe to follow us for more movie recaps.